What are the odds of a US-based nuclear company, Westinghouse, building AP1000s in Canada? With fluctuating tariffs, ongoing political tit-for-tat.
Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. If we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that.
Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership in the economy, in security, and in rich cultural exchange. But Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian.
And talk about Canada becoming the 51st state, you'd think that the chance of building American-branded reactors in Canada would be basically zero. And yet, Westinghouse is acting like the opposite, signing MOUs, building out a partner network, and working with provincial governments. So in today's video, I wanted to take a look at why Westinghouse might be proceeding in what, at first glance, looks like an impossible task. And the probability of building AP1000s in Canada is a lot higher than most people probably expect. For context, nuclear power in Canada has continued to gain some momentum recently, with multiple new build projects proposed in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, some as big as 4,800 megawatts each. But with ongoing political tensions between Canada and the United States, it would seem that anything American-branded would really suffer to gain any market traction within the country. We've seen that effect impacting everything from grocery stores to automobile sales. And so while a few years ago it may have been reasonable for US companies such as Westinghouse to build AP1000s in Canada, the public backlash at least looks to be very strongly anti-American. So it seems somewhat strange then that Westinghouse would sign MOUs with Canadian companies and continue to build out a potential supply chain if its reactors are not going to be accepted by the public or the politicians, especially since Westinghouse has been held up by the Trump administration as a central institution of American nuclear power. But there are still a few reasons why this might make some sense. Westinghouse is fully owned by Canadian companies, Brookfield Asset Management and Cameco. The vast majority of Westinghouse's operations are concentrated within the United States, around its Pittsburgh headquarters and in the southern part of the United States in the Carolinas. It does have a few Canadian facilities for fabrication and office management. But what Westinghouse is trying to do is position itself as a made in Canada and delivered in Canada for each of these potential projects. And it has been pushing really hard to try and push that message. They're talking about this buy where we build approach, where they want to emphasize the impact on Canadian jobs and the Canadian economy. And they've produced a video targeting specifically the Canadian market in this respect. And it's subtle, but see if you can tell that they're targeting the Canadian market here.
At Westinghouse, we believe in the power of community. From the people we work with to the places we build, we are committed to creating long-lasting, positive impacts.
We strongly believe in buy where you build. We've already started engaging the supply chain. We always look at what's first in building with the plant, so your large structures. We've already started to engage the supply chain. We have great suppliers from Canada already, and we're continuing to look across Canada.
So, this is what you would normally do if you're trying to build a project overseas, is you need to engage with local suppliers because it's the only way you're going to get support from the local provincial governments and the federal government in order to be able to do that.
When the supplier is successful, we're successful.
Our approach to nuclear energy is about more than power. It's about building stronger, more resilient communities and creating jobs that support generations to come.
In an initiative like this, you're going to want to say that, yes, we're going to create lots of local jobs and we're going to do great things for the local economy. So the messaging here is exactly what you would expect.
A 4-unit AP1000 selection, 4.8 gigawatts, would potentially contribute upwards of $29 billion to Canada's GDP.
$29 billion is a lot, and most of that is probably going to be from labor and local supply chain. How much of it is going to then be redirected back to the U.S. entities is hard to say. And normally they would be saying that $29 billion is not necessarily the cost of the plant, but it would be the impact from the local jobs in terms of the actual construction, supply chain, and secondary jobs that get created because of this.
It would create 7,900 jobs per year over the span of the project. It would generate enough electricity to power over 3 million homes.
At Westinghouse, we are proud to partner with local suppliers and trade unions, investing in local talent and supporting industries that fuel economic growth and
When we're talking about construction and building nuclear power plants, the trade unions are obviously going to be very important in that. And so Canada has quite a strong system of unions that would be involved. And so saying that, look, we're going to provide you additional jobs as well, is certainly something they would want to do to reinforce their case.
innovation.
We see a Westinghouse new build project in Canada bringing significant positive impacts to our Canadian nuclear supply base.
The positive effects go beyond the worksite. We are committed to ensuring that the communities around our plants benefit for decades to come.
Okay, I mean, he's putting on a hockey jersey. I don't know how much more targeting the Canadian market you can get than that. Looks nice, though.
I think there are truly great opportunities where we can support women in the industry and make sure that we are taking the right steps and sticking to our commitments.
Together, we're building a future where innovation strengthens local economies and empowers communities to thrive. This is how we work, and this is how we build together. Westinghouse, ready now.
Westinghouse has been primarily targeting two locations in Canada: the Bruce C expansion project in Ontario and the Peace River nuclear power project in Alberta. Both of these projects are for up to 4,800 megawatts of new generation. And both of these sites are interesting in their own way. The Bruce plant in Ontario already operates 8 CANDU reactors at the site. But in looking to add more, they still are taking what they call a technology-neutral approach and are considering multiple designs, including the AP1000, EPR, BWRX-300, ABWR, and of course the CANDU Energy Monarch, which is an updated version of the CANDU reactor. However, the Peace River project in Alberta would be Alberta's first foray into nuclear energy, which means they're not necessarily tied to CANDU technology already. The project is still in the early stages, but that hasn't stopped Westinghouse from signing MOUs with Energy Alberta in order to evaluate the technical feasibility of building AP1000s. And perhaps feeling a little bit under pressure in its home market, AtkinsRéalis, the owner of the CANDU technology and the CANDU reactor design, has started making a stronger push for its own reactor to be built in Canada. And just like Westinghouse, they have also produced a video to promote their CANDU technology for the domestic market.
Energy powers our lives. It starts our mornings, invigorates our days, and lights up our evenings, allowing us to do what we want to do and go where we want to go. And as we go further, faster, we need reliable, safe, and secure energy solutions. We need CANDU nuclear energy to fuel our future. Canada has a proud story to tell, a story of innovation and ingenuity, of sound solutions to global challenges. During the past century, Canada's researchers and scientists developed and perfected the internationally renowned CANDU reactor.
That's true, and there's a number of reasons why the CANDU technology came about. In the time during and after World War II, Canada really had limited access to enrichment technology. The US wasn't generally sharing it with them. But Canada did have access to natural uranium, and it was well known that reactors could run on natural uranium. Canada also lacked access to heavy forgings, which is why when you look at the CANDU design, you see a limited number of very heavy components. The large outer vessel of the CANDU reactor, called the calandria, actually doesn't have to hold that much pressure compared to boiling water and pressurized water reactors. The individual fuel channels or pressure tubes are what actually have the high-pressure water stored within them, and therefore you don't need very large forgings in order to make these small tubes. However, you do end up with a whole lot of tubes.
Perfected the internationally renowned CANDU reactor, our homegrown solution currently powering 60% of Ontario and 15% of Canada. Its use of domestically sourced natural uranium eliminates the cost of enrichment. Its unique heavy
And that does save a lot on the fuel fabrication and fuel preparation. Enrichment can add about a third of the cost of the fuel, but it also means you won't be able to extract as much energy per amount of fuel that's loaded into the reactor. And therefore, you'll have to cycle more fuel through it, and it actually generates a bit more waste. Not that waste is impossible to deal with, but it is something that does have to be done.
heavy water design regulates a slow, safe reaction.
And to offset the penalty of using natural uranium, you have to use heavy water. And this creates two disadvantages for the CANDU design. When using heavy water as the moderator, it means the size of the reactor core is going to increase, because the amount of moderation that can happen within heavy water is much less dense compared to light water used in other reactors. So this is why when you look at a CANDU reactor, the size is much larger compared to the power output. And the other disadvantage of heavy water is that it's very expensive to produce, and this contributes significantly to the upfront capital cost of building a CANDU reactor. The cost of the heavy water for a CANDU reactor can be anywhere from 15 to 20% of the initial construction cost. So it's not cheap, but it is a one-time cost compared to the ongoing cost of enrichment.
And its exclusive capacity for active refueling maintains a steady output.
Active refueling means online refueling, which is a nice feature of CANDU reactors in that they can refuel without shutting the reactor down, unlike PWRs and BWRs. But continuous refueling is nice, so it does provide some additional operational flexibility.
Enabling more than 75,000 jobs across Canada, and with 85% of parts, equipment,
So now they're making the same point that Westinghouse was, in that these projects create lots of local jobs and support the local supply chain.
and service sourced domestically. CANDU doesn't just energize our homes, but our communities and our economy. Investing in CANDU builds a future of clean nuclear power for generations to come, while tomorrow's energy demands are made possible by refurbishment of existing plants and new builds. And patients around the world rely on CANDU to provide the medical isotopes that sterilize surgical equipment and diagnose.
This is a nice feature of CANDU reactors because of the way they're constructed with these different pressure tubes, and it's not all sealed in one big pressurized vessel like in a BWR or PWR. This means it makes it much easier to insert and remove samples. And depending on what you want to do, you can then use these samples to produce medical isotopes like molybdenum-99 or cobalt-60. And CANDU reactors are actually one of the largest producers of these materials around the world. And being able to do that on a commercial scale is a nice benefit.
And treat deadly diseases. Backed by years of investment and innovation, our exemplary global reputation rests on a solid foundation. Abundant natural resources, robust regulatory practices, ground.
One of the nice things about CANDU reactors in terms of safety is simply because the power density is so low that they handle events like station blackout like we saw at Fukushima very well. There was an incident in India that had an accident at a plant that was based on the CANDU design, and they went without power, complete station blackout. And basically nothing happened because the power density was so low and it was so easy to handle for the operators. But one issue that CANDU reactors would have, especially if they were planning to license themselves in somewhere like the United States, is because of the heavy water, the reactors tend to be what we call over-moderated, which means if you lose some of the moderator, the amount of reactivity actually increases in the reactor, also known as a positive void coefficient, which means that if there's a loss of water or moderation along one of the channels, instead of the power decreasing like we see in a PWR or BWR, the power can actually increase, which isn't ideal, and there are systems in order to mitigate that within the CANDU reactor. But it is something to keep in mind when you're talking about regulations and how the reactor could be licensed elsewhere.
Groundbreaking research and laboratories, a strong, knowledgeable supply chain, a skilled and dedicated workforce.
For the CANDU reactor, this is also quite important. The majority of the CANDU supply chain is entirely within Canada. So if a country was interested in avoiding international supplier dependency, having a lot of domestic supply chain would help.
And collaborative, committed partnerships. As the exclusive stewards of Canada-owned CANDU technology, AtkinsRéalis is building on this legacy with confidence in its future. As the dominant clean energy solution, CANDU is poised to scale up, bolstering our economy, protecting our environment, and reaching our net zero goals. Opportunity is at our doorstep. We have the advantage with investment, expertise, and partnerships. Imagine what we can do.
So both AtkinsRéalis and Westinghouse are taking the same approach in saying that our reactors will be built in Canada with Canadian jobs and Canadian supply chains. Both have majority Canadian owners, but Westinghouse still has a bit of an American flag on it. A lot of the supply chain is still going to be coming from the US, especially the fuel. Canada has no enrichment, and the fuel that would be used in the AP1000s, if they are built in Canada, would come from Westinghouse facilities within the US, which does introduce potential geopolitical risks into the supply chain. So if Westinghouse does want to build these AP1000s in Canada, it has a bit of extra work cut out for it in order to convince the local populations and governments that it's going to be a Canadian project. And not to make predictions here, but we could see a split between Ontario and Alberta. Backlash against the Trump administration has been especially strong in Ontario. And with the existing sites like Bruce that already have CANDU reactors, introducing a new technology would complicate their own management of personnel, training, supplies, and equipment. So I think building AP1000s in Ontario is going to be much more difficult. Alberta, on the other hand, tends to be a bit more conservative and not as well aligned with the federal government. For Albertans, it would also be a new build project, so being open to all kinds of technology does make a little bit more sense for them. We'll have to keep an eye on how things progress from these initial impact assessments and MOUs towards more definitive contracts and licensing. But at this point, it's too early to tell. If you found this video interesting, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It does help out enormously, and you get to stay up to date on everything that's going on in the nuclear world. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.